I am honored today to interview a person who graciously agreed to be on the podcast, even though we haven't met. Our common threads are that we are, or in my case, was, both college professors, and we are both published by Colorful Crow Publishing of Calhoun, Georgia. This is how I learned of Dr. Eliot Parker, but I should have known of him before because of his excellent writing and his awards and accolades. Dr. Eliot Parker is professor of English at the University of Mississippi, which is affectionately called Ole Miss in certain parts of the country. This is a storied campus and an academic leader. We are going to talk about teaching, writing, higher education, and creativity today. And I know this is one you'll want to play more than once. Stay tuned. Dialogues with Creators, and thank you for your time during July when we teachers and professors typically take some time off. I want to start with you telling your story because from what I read, you're from West Virginia, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But now you are a professor at the University of Mississippi. So I'm interested in how that journey academically and professionally and personally happened for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the program. I'm delighted to be here and appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. But yeah, I was born and raised in West Virginia. I was a journalism major. I went to Marshall University. I was a journalism major as an undergrad. And unfortunately, I entered the professional realm of journalism around the time that Gannett and Clear Channel Media was going around the country and gobbling up newspapers and radio stations and television stations. So I found myself in a situation where either I couldn't get a job or I would get a job and then would have Gannett or Clear Channel come in and buy up the company or buy up the station I was working for, and suddenly I was out of a job. So long story short, I ended up going back to graduate school. I ended up getting my MFA in creative writing at Eastern Kentucky University and my doctorate in English at Murray State. And I spent some time teaching at Marshall University, where I went to school as a student. I taught at Mount West Community College for 10 years, and I've been at the University of Mississippi since 2018. And coming down here was really interesting. I was looking for something different professionally. I wanted to, go somewhere else and maybe live somewhere else for a while. I was born and raised in West Virginia. I was just looking for something different. And I applied to all these different kinds of schools that I thought would fit my skill set. And I had like 3 buckets of schools. I had the schools that would never hire me, the schools that might hire me, and then the schools that I think would hire me. And so Ole Miss was kind of in that middle bucket. I don't think that they'll hire me just because, they were looking for certain things, certain job qualifications that I didn't necessarily have at the time. But yeah, so I got a call in March of 2018 and accepted the job in May that year. And that's how I ended up here. But, West Virginia and Appalachia is still very much home. Kentucky, very much a part of who I am. And Mississippi's become a part of that too.
Okay. So what exactly do you teach at Ole Miss, if I can call it Ole Miss?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I teach a little bit of everything, but my background is in business and technical writing. So I teach a lot of professional writing courses, scientific technical writing, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I do teach some creative writing occasionally, composition, digital rhetorics, things of that sort. I can really do just a lot of everything, but mostly my teaching responsibilities are professional and technical writing.
Okay. I always like to ask people who have doctorates what your dissertation was about.
My dissertation was about narrative writing and how narrative can be a way for underprepared and unmotivated or undermotivated writers to engage with the writing process. And, narrative writing is something that I find very valuable as a writer myself. I think it's a very valuable skill for students to learn. In the classroom, especially early on in their college careers. But I feel like narrative writing at the time I was working on the dissertation had gotten a bad rap that, people were saying, well, the student's story doesn't matter, or, people's perspectives and stories aren't as important as the researched academic essay. And I think what we found is, since really COVID, but also with the advent of technology, is that people's stories do matter, and people's stories are very unique, and that people like connecting with other people around stories and experiences. And so that led me to kind of look at narrative writing through the prism of, well, can you use that to engage students with the writing process if they're either underprepared or unmotivated or afraid about writing, by opening the writing skills and the qualities and qualifications we want them to have through telling their own story. So that was really what my dissertation focused on.
That's fascinating. It's interesting because I assumed you would have done some sort of literary analysis for that work, but that's really as someone who's taught writing, I'm very interested in that. And for your MFA, did you have to produce a novel or a group of short stories?
Yes, I did a novel. I was in the fiction track. So we had 3 tracks. There was fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. And I was in the fiction track. And so we had 2 options. We could either do a collection of stories or do a novel. And so I worked on a novel during the time that I was there, and it ended up getting published after I finished.
Okay, which one is that?
Called Breakdown at Clear River. And
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Breakdown at Clear River.
Breakdown at Clear River. Oh, okay.
It's a murder mystery that's set in West Virginia, where I'm from, and it was published by a small press in West Virginia. And it was awesome to see that published and to see someone interested in putting that work together. And but it was great. And my MFA experience was wonderful. I loved the whole process of working on that book was great, but I loved the opportunity to really have a couple of years to really focus on writing, to focus on the craft of writing, to focus on my weaknesses, to get those better, to focus on my strengths. It was a tremendous experience. I had a great experience in that program, and it led to that book being published.
It's interesting what you were saying about your dissertation, is that I think there's this feeling that narrative writing or fiction is not as challenging, or it's just easy either to write or to read. And that's, I've been thinking about that. It's how much to really read fiction, or as poetry too, but I don't write poetry very much. So I think in terms of fiction, really takes certain analytical skills that it's not easy, to really read it and then to write it. People, of course, I'm sure you get this from people as well, say, oh, I could write a book. I want to write a book. It couldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
Say, whatever, go do it then.
Right, exactly. It's one of those things that people at parties and at cocktail parties love to say, I've got an idea that I know will make a great book, and I'm going to sit out and write that book someday.
Yeah.
And then you talk to them 5 years later. Yeah, I've still got that idea, just haven't really sat down and put it on paper yet. And I think some of it is because it's not as easy as you think.
No, it's not.
Especially with narratives too, especially because, you have to grab the reader, get them into your story, but you have to illustrate for them these people in this environment and the circumstances that you're writing about, and they only know it through the prism in which you describe it. And so that really challenges, I think, writers to think about using sensory description and think about, connecting a story together that's going to have sort of a beginning, middle, and an end. And, I always tell my students when we talk about narrative, I say, when you're working on this essay, a lot of people are going to say, well, how long did it take you to write this essay? And you'll say, oh, well, it took me, the whole weekend, or, 6 hours or whatever. But no one will ever ask you, how much time did you spend thinking about this essay before you started writing it? And I think with narrative and with writing novels and books and short stories and really everything creatively, it's as much of a thinking activity as it is actually sitting down and doing the writing, because the writing is a byproduct of thinking and of the amount of thinking that you've put into it. And so, I think with narrative especially, that's really, really a significant part of that type of a genre of writing, is the thinking that goes into it before you sit down to write.
Yeah. I do mind walking the dogs. So
Perfect time to do it. Perfect.
Yeah, it is, because the dogs don't really talk back anyway. So since you're talking about the technology, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and, because I've been reading a lot about this in the last couple of years, especially last year, is the AI issues with your students, and especially because you're working with business technical writing. And then, where how it relates to creative writing. I mean, I would hate that anybody would use AI seriously for creative writing, but unfortunately, I think they do. So, how about it from an academic or teaching standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you might remember too, Barbara, I don't know if you saw this story that was online or it made its way through the meme, social media memes. And I believe this was true. The Chicago Sun-Times had put an article about, the hot books to come out this summer. And, there was 20 of them, I think, and 10 of them had been AI generated. The titles, the authors, the descriptions did flips, which, back to what I was saying about media a minute ago, about sort of this corporatization of media that has not served us well. This is an example. There's nobody checked that. Nobody at the Chicago, which is a major paper. I mean, this is a paper that, Robert Novak wrote for and that has won all kinds of Pulitzer Prizes for over the decades. And nobody sat down to check, let me see if, this book exists or find out a little bit more information about this author, or this is a really great, nobody did any of that, which I think is an indictment of the media culture that we live in, sadly. But in terms of, I'm with you. I would like to think that nobody is using this in a creative space, but we're seeing AI seep in. And in terms of academics, my view on AI is this, and I'm certainly not an AI expert, but, AI, I don't believe was created and has been created for the common good, to spread knowledge and to benefit humanity. AI has been created to put in business and industry opportunities to get rid of people and have machines do the work that people once did. And, and I know exactly. Yeah. So it's for the manufacturing plant to be able to hire 200 less employees and have the machine, the AI bot or whatever it is, do that work that those 200 men or women did before. I mean, so, I don't look at AI as this altruistic thing that was designed to benefit us all and to generate knowledge. It's designed to, reduce human capital from certain businesses and industries. And I just read a book that was really, really good by Stephen Wick called The Thinking Machine. And it is a book about NVIDIA, the technology company NVIDIA, and the microchips that they're making. And it's not a book about AI so much as it's about how these microchips are being built now by companies like NVIDIA with this AI capability in them, so that that computer can do the work of two or three people, that took 2 and 3 people. And these are typically entry-level positions in a lot of businesses and industries. So I would recommend folks reading that if you want to learn a little bit more about, kind of the role that technology is playing in AI. But in terms of academics, I really don't want my students using AI right now.
Yeah.
I want them to learn, I think one of the most beneficial skills that they will have and can develop as they go into the workforce, no matter what field they're going into or what profession they're going to pursue, is the ability to be persuasive and be convincing in writing and to argue your point and support that point with facts and details and evidence. And I think having AI do that for you is not helping you at all in that space. And one of the things that students will often find when they use AI, particularly freshmen and sophomores who don't have a lot of experience with it, is the writing is very clunky. It's very robotic and not natural. It doesn't sound like a human being wrote it. It sounds like a machine wrote it. And oftentimes they don't realize that when they're, working on that paper at 4 a.m. and it's due at 11 the next day, and they're trying to, get it done. And they just say, well, I'll just, see if AI can write this. And then when I sit down to read it, or a classmate sits down to read it, it doesn't sound like a human wrote it. It sounds like a machine wrote it. And so for now, I don't really want my students using AI. I want them to learn. I want their brains to hurt when they're going through the writing process, because I think that's where growth really occurs. And right now, at least, AI is clunky in terms of the essay writing portion of this. And this is true for business and technical writing. If you have it do a memo for you or an email for you around a given topic, it's going to be kind of clunky and awkward when you read it. Now, my concern is it's going to get more sophisticated as time goes on. And I think we're going to see that it's going to try to mimic more human patterns of writing and human voice as the next iteration, or as Google or as Microsoft comes out with the next Chat GPT or whatever site it's going to be. But I don't really want students using it right now. And I have some colleagues that I work with that view it differently. They think, we need to be instructing them how to use AI, because if we don't teach them how to do it responsibly, who's going to? And I see the side to that as well. But, I want to read my own students' work, and I want to read their thinking and what their ideas are. Even if it's not good, we can always take, things that need a little bit more work and polish them up and revise them and get them ready to where they need to be. But I think back to what you were saying a minute ago too about if you're using AI to write stories for you creatively, you just need to not do that, or maybe writing it. Yeah, or maybe writing isn't for you. If you want to be a writer, you want to be a creative writer, a short story writer, a poet, a novelist, or whatever, and you're relying on Chat GPT to do the work for you, I just don't think you're maybe in the right creative space, or you're looking at this the wrong way. And so I've got some different views on it, but I really think we need to understand that AI has not been created for humanity to benefit. It's been created to eliminate human capital in industries where there can be opportunities for that. And so I think when you look at it from that perspective and how it's structured and built and developed, and you think about that as the sort of the underlying thread of what this is and what it's about, then I think you look at it differently as a platform and as a research.
Yeah, I was in a meeting with my dean and the other department chairs in arts and sciences and in the spring, and he said, and he's a mathematician, and he said, well, I was in a meeting with some county executives, and board members, and I asked him how many of them expected their employees to use AI, and they all but two of them did. And we need to be doing this. And of course, the English department and history department, they went ballistic. And I said, well, I have my students use it for an assignment so that they can, see what it does. Some of them had used it, but they used it like you say, clunky. It's like I procrastinated, and and it's so clearly that they did that. Now, some people have learned to use it, and I've read some essays on this where if you prompt it enough and then you go back and you edit it and everything, but they ended up spending more time writing the piece through AI than just doing it themselves.
Absolutely.
So they had to fix it so much and train the AI to with the prompts. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just one big plagiarism machine, anyway. And it lies. It's just a lot of the stuff you get is not even remotely correct. Yeah, and it'll make up sources, just makes them up, or says they mean something they don't mean. It's just like people.
I totally agree. And I feel like too, one of the frustrating parts about it from our perspective too is it's taking me longer now to give feedback on student work.
Yes.
I'm having to constantly, verify. And I'm coming up with some other solutions coming into this academic year where they're going to have to do a little more source verification when they turn something in. But within this last year, it was taking me a lot longer to get feedback to students because I was having to check and see, was this source legitimate, or did this really connect to a study that it said it did? And for the most part, everything was legitimate. But it is right now. It is kind of a big plagiarism machine, and there's no guardrails. It's kind of like the Wild West with no sheriff. There's nobody kind of overseeing what's in there, how it's arranged, who's putting what in there, regulating who the contributors are. And I think that's not good either.
And so you've segued into the teaching aspect, and I've noticed that you've won some teaching awards at Ole Miss and probably elsewhere. So and this was a field, my dissertation was on faculty development, actually. So I'm always interested in what, how people approach teaching, especially now. But what do you consider the qualities of excellent teaching in a college environment?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the first things you need to do, no matter who you are, where you teach, or what you teach, is get to know your students' names. Know them by name and by face. I'm amazed at the connections that happen in the classroom when you know that student's name and they know that you know their name. And that really, I think, establishes a a good rapport from the beginning of the semester. And I know if you're teaching in a classroom with 150 students, that sometimes that isn't as easy. But if you have an opportunity to learn their names, even in that context, I think that is something that's really, really important. And I think, so much about teaching is about relationships. It's about, developing those relationships, showing your vulnerabilities, that, we're not just a robot or a cyborg that gets plugged into the wall like an old vacuum cleaner when class is over. We actually are real people that have interests and goals and fears and doubts just like they do. So I think working those into the classroom is helpful, helps them see us more as people. But I think that, good teaching starts with those things in mind. And I think it also is an important concept to consider, how you structure your classroom and, allowing students opportunities to share, allowing students opportunities to work together, to learn from each other. I think it's really, really important. I think good teaching is having a lot of mix up and change up in your classroom every day, not just 50 minutes of lecture, not just an hour and 15 minutes of lecture, but, every 10 or 15 minutes, change it up. Maybe that's a mini lecture followed by, a short writing activity and a sharing part of that activity. Maybe it's group work for a while, and then the group reports out to the class, and we kind of assess what the general feel is or the general opinion is about whatever topic it is that we're focusing on. So I think that flipped classroom concept is really, really important. And I think, being more, supportive and, encouraging students that it is okay if you don't get this on the first try, or if the first draft of your essay or your business memo or your white paper, whatever it is that you're working on, is not great. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. One of the things I'm always amazed about with working with freshman students when I do is they're so afraid to use commas as punctuation marks, for example. They somewhere along the way, they had a teacher or an experience where every time they got the comma wrong, they got 5 points off the rest of
Wow.
And I would rather us work on developing your ideas and making those ideas the best representation of your thinking. I'd rather let's worry about that first, and then we'll go back and make sure we've got all the commas in the right place.
Yeah.
But it's those kinds of things I think really make for good teaching, that if you do make a mistake or it isn't perfect, that it's okay, that we're getting there and we will get there. And so I think a lot of what my role as a teacher is sort of being a coach and an encourager, and helping students, because, students, as you know, Barbara, come from so many different backgrounds. They come from so many different educational experiences, life experiences, home experiences, that their levels of confidence and skills are all over the place. But, if you can establish that classroom climate to where it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay if you get it wrong. And if you do, so what? We're not going to put the scarlet letter around your neck and, make fun of you and pick on you. And if you get the comma put in the wrong spot, well, that's all right.
Yeah.
I can fix that later. I just think that is so much of good teaching, is creating that environment where learning is fun, but also where students are not afraid to take risks with their learning. So those are the ways I try to structure my classroom and try to get to know them as individuals. And, I had a quick example that I had a girl in my class last year who was from Oregon. And I was just amazed that all the states and all the schools she passed, from Oregon all the way to Mississippi, Mississippi. And I can't remember exactly what she said, but she said, I came and just we were on vacation my junior year, and I came and took a tour, and we went to several schools in the Mid-South, went to Memphis, and we went to, UT Knoxville, and we went to Ole Miss, and I loved it. So anytime something connected to Oregon or, connected to the Pacific Northwest, I would always mention that to her, like before class. I would say, hey, did you see that Oregon got, 8 inches of rain the other day? Or, or when it came time for Thanksgiving break, you're flying back to Oregon, right? Instead of driving back. Just those little anecdotes. You get that by knowing your students, by getting their name and knowing a little bit about them. And I probably drove her crazy by always back to Oregon, but it allowed us to develop a rapport, so that when she had an academic issue or was struggling, she felt comfortable to come to me and talk about it. So I try to do that with all of my students, get to know something about them related to where they're from, their interests, what they've done in school, and just kind of sprinkle that in and either before class or after class, or if I see them on campus or whatever. And I just think that's so important. I think when they see us as people, and we take an interest in them, not just as students, but also as individuals, I think you can really, really have an awesome classroom climate that facilitates learning.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, probably something a little more controversial, but since you're talking about teaching and doing that takes so much more time. So I'm interested in how you find time to write because I know as a, college professor, especially at a place like University of Mississippi, it's not just your classroom experience. You've got committees and, those kinds of things that take up a lot of time as well. And, in professional development, you have to probably do research as well. So it's really heartening for me to hear you talk about the personal connection with students, because that does take a lot of time. So, I want to get back to this time issue in a minute, but what do you think are some of the things? Of course, you're at an R1 and I was at a state college, but what do you think are some of the things that are facing higher ed right now?
Well, I think money is always an issue that higher ed is facing. It seems like that even when on a national scale, the economy's doing well, the country's doing well, business and industry is doing well, there's always money needed for higher education. Mm-hmm. And so I think money is a certain issue. What we've seen here in Mississippi is that, when I got here in 2018, I believe, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe about 38% of the higher ed budgets for schools like Ole Miss and other colleges in our state was funded through the legislative process through the state legislature. Yeah. Uh-huh. Now I think we're down to about 21%. So we had a 17% cut. And that's not because I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes that we think, well, legislators don't care about education. And I don't think that's true. I just think that there's been other issues and other needs that have come up that they needed to take that money from higher education and put it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And their rationale for that would be, yes, we needed to fix this other issue, but you guys can just raise tuition. You can make a loss by just raising your tuition. And, that creates all kinds of other, discussion and ethical issues. But I think money is a huge thing. I think what we were talking about a minute ago, Barbara, with AI is a huge thing. I don't know of anybody at Ole Miss, and I don't know of any of my colleagues friends of mine that teach at other schools really have their arms around AI. I mean, I think there are some folks and some schools that are a little bit ahead of others in terms of how to put their arms around this big gorilla, but nobody really has sort of the boilerplate, template for how to handle this and how to deal with this, not just, within an English and writing context, but cross-disciplinary in pharmacy and law and education. Yeah. In journalism. I mean, nobody really just knows how to handle that. So I think that's a huge issue. I think, we're getting a lot of pressure, I think, as an institution, higher education, to have students graduate with workplace readiness skills, quote unquote.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And having worked at a community college for 10 years, that was our focus. I understand what that is when I hear people talk about that, but, that's not always what, I don't want to say what occurs at a 4-year institution or an R1, but the mission's a little different. Yes, we want students to get jobs, and yes, we want our students to be able to go into the workforce and be able to make a good salary right as they graduate and start a good life. But I think our focus is a little different, and I think that's okay. I think that's fun, and I think we need to articulate that more. As faculty, staff, administration, that, hey, just because we're not doing the community college model doesn't mean your student is not getting a really good experience that's going to give them an advantage in their life down the road. So those are the three big things I see right now that we're facing. And I think, this gets whipped up because, of media and talk shows and podcasts and talk radio and all these things. There's all these people with platforms and hosts and guests, and everybody's got an opinion. It's just all kind of swerving out here, swirling around on the surface. But I think, we as the professionals working in the institutions have got to break through that noise and say, there is value to what we're doing, and we need the money to do it and to do it well. And we need to be trusted as professionals with the expertise that we have, that not only on the content side, but on the student learning side, that we're going to get students ready to be where they need to be by the time they finish their program of study with us.
Yeah.
So I think those are the three big issues and I think and I'm guilty of this too, we've got to speak up more about this, be louder about this, and not be ashamed of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah, I think that is really key. I appreciate you saying that. In terms of time, then, you do a lot of writing, and you also do a lot of speaking, and you have a podcast and that kind of thing. So I wanted to kind of shift into that area. I've often wondered why more English professors didn't write, but having been an administrator myself, and it's like there is no time. You have to give something up. So why do you think a lot of English professors don't write or produce writing?
I think a lot of it is time. I think a lot of it is family obligations. I think a lot of it is there is only so many hours in the day, and every week is a little bit different. I mean, even though, you're teaching on a college semester schedule and, you have your classes that meet on these days and these times, everything else that happens outside of that every week is very different, and no 2 weeks are the same, which is why I love being a professor, because, I get bored easily, and I could never be one of those people that works in a job where I'm doing the exact same thing every single day over and over and over again. I would be bored to tears. And so I like the fact that every week is different to some degree, and that every semester is different to some degree. So I think that's a lot of it. I think there's a pressure to give feedback to students in a timely manner on the work that they submit.
Yeah.
And, students I've noticed over the years are a lot more persistent in wanting to know when they're going to get that feedback. And, have got our papers graded yet? Or had made any comments on my draft? Have you had a chance to look at my, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from. And I feel that same way if I was in their shoes. And I remember being that way as a student, being like, oh, I wonder if he's gotten our papers graded yet, or when we're going to get our tests back, So I think all of those things kind of swirl around. And I think it's just a pull. They sort of feel like Gumby, just kind of pulled from one side. It's about as far as you can go. So I think that's one reason. And how I've combated that and kind of come around that. And this probably isn't, might not be a recipe that works for everybody, but I'm kind of an early morning. I'm not really a morning person, but I feel like I do some of my best thinking and engagement with writing early in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I typically will do that earlier in the morning, get up early before, the day starts and the chaos of the house begins and the animals need fed and all that sort of stuff. And do a lot of my writing there, or at least do a lot of my, outlining or thinking about, if I'm in a novel, for example, okay, I'm ready to go to the next phase of the story, and where do I need to focus on? What's my characters going to need to be doing, those kinds of things. And then that way I've made some progress on my writing before the day starts. And so if I go to school, go to work, and the rest of the week or the rest of the day is busy or tied up, or I get pulled in a variety of different directions for whatever reason, I've at least gotten some of that writing done. Now, some of those mornings I get 100 words written. Some mornings I really get on a roll and it's 750 to 1,000. Yeah, I'm really on it. And sometimes it's just kind of looking at the keyboard or the cursor on the screen thinking, well, why did you write that yesterday? What was that?
Yeah.
But I kind of view it from the perspective of anything better than zero is positive. So if I'm spending even just 5 minutes or correcting one word or adding one word to the story, then I've made progress. And that's the only way I can do it. And I've also come very fiercely protective of my writing time. And there are times, I write on the weekends, like Sunday afternoons, if nothing's going on, I'll write. And, I did that the other day because it's, 110 degrees here in Mississippi and do anything. So I sat down at like 2:30 in the afternoon and wrote for about an hour and a half. So I do it at other times as well, but I've become very fiercely protective of my writing time. And whatever time I schedule for that day or that week, if it's a mix of mornings and afternoons or all mornings or whatever, I'm fiercely protective of that time. And, the house basically needs to be on fire to get me to not devote that
Yeah.
time to writing.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have to do that, because if you're not protective of that writing time, somebody's going to be always sort of nibbling at that,
Mm-hmm.
trying to give, and there's other things that you have to do, but, laundry has to be done, dishes have to be washed, papers have to be graded, emails have to be returned.
Yeah.
Something nibbling at your time if you don't say, from 6 to 7:30, I'm not doing anything but working on this project, or from 2 to 3:30, I'm going to focus on writing this particular chapter, and not let anything kind of distract you. So that's how I've been able to balance the time. But I think, one of the things too, I think we were talking earlier about issues. I think, there's a misconception. Every college professor I've ever known is a very busy person.
Yeah.
And it's, we don't just show up to class 5 minutes before, do our thing and leave, and then, just go, sit around or go home and, watch television or whatever. I mean, we do a lot, not only for our students that isn't seen in front of the classroom, but to serve our institutions and our communities in the work that we do. And so I think that some of those pressures, I think, are one of the reasons it makes it difficult too for English professors to write, produce it at a high level, because you've got those other needs within academia that need to be met. And it's primarily our duty to do those things. And so I think just that time crunch and that feel of being pulled in a variety of different directions is problematic.
Yeah. I read a book with a reading group at the college this last year called Deep Work by Cal Newport. Are you familiar with that book?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And it really spoke to me, as they say, because my biggest thing was I spent way too much time on email. Of course, I was an administrator, but I just really had to get a grip on my email. It was embarrassing, and that has helped. But you're so right; it has to be protected. The time has to be protected. And so let's talk a little bit more about I've been reading some of your short stories and enjoying them. I read the first one in the collection called Table for Two, about the older man who has dementia. And I really was moved by that story, because I think we think of dementia as just this inevitable, I guess for some people. I mean, my grandmother lived to 98 and she didn't have it, but this inevitable brain disorder that's just going to make your memory go away. We don't really understand these things. And but you had a line in there that it wasn't dementia, it was a broken heart, or something along that line. And I just thought, the psychological and the emotional and the spiritual part comes into the dementia as well. It's not just the brain synapses and doing whatever they don't do. You know what I'm saying? Am I getting the point?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's not just losing your ability to think and to process and in some cases identify, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, these people that you should know very, very well. It's not just that part of it, but you lose a little bit of yourself through that process. You suddenly lose interest in things that you used to have interest in before. You lose your passions, you lose your hobbies, you lose your love of food. When I have talked to people, and fortunately, nobody on either side of my immediate family suffers from dementia. But when I talk to friends and colleagues who have family members and loved ones who suffer from dementia, one of the things that they often will say is, my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, uncle, my mom, dad loved to eat whatever it might be, Italian food, for example.
Yeah.
And now they look at it like you're feeding them baby food. They need, and whereas if, they would eat, spaghetti and meatballs every day if you put it in front of them. And so, when I hear those kind of comments from people who are, dealing with loved ones who are suffering from that's where kind of that line came from, because it's just more than the ability to recognize people. You lose everything that made you slowly get eroded as that dementia sort of takes over and starts to become more pervasive, and you start to almost become a different person. You're not the same person that loved one knew, not just because you can't recognize them or call them by name, but everything that they knew you loved and knew you were passionate about and knew you were interested in is suddenly gone. And you're kind of this empty vessel of a person that doesn't really have those passions and interests. And I think that's hard on the loved ones to see. It's hard to watch that, that deterioration from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, I was really enjoyed that story. And then I was also reading the one about the girl who, there were two others, the girl who in her wedding, and she gets with that weird wedding person. And I thought that was such an indictment of, well, the wedding industry for one thing, but also just isolation. I mean, that she went to somebody that she knew online to do this thing that was so important to her, and she was so sure of it. It just was, and it's such an interesting characterization of this woman, and and then she was in a relationship, and her father's giving her a hard time about it and everything. So, and then I also read the one about the gentleman who's seeing, he thinks Grant is there. He knows he's not there, but he just is playing out this dinner with his friend, from the past who's passed away, and how everybody reacts to it. I just thought it was they're very good. I really appreciate that. How did you find out about Colorful Crow?
Oh, that's a great question. I am a member of the Broadleaf Writers Group.
Oh, okay.
Based out of Atlanta, and there was an event. I don't know if it was a literary festival. I did not go. I didn't attend, but we had a table. We were just passing out information about the organization. We do a meeting conference every year in Decatur, Georgia in September.
Yeah.
Our 10th conference coming up this September, which is
I'm hoping to go. I need to get my stuff into that.
Yeah, we would love to see you. It's going to be a lot of fun, some really great There's really great panels and everything. Well, we had a table set up at a venue, and I don't remember exactly where it was. And Colorful Crow had a representative there, and I don't remember who it was now. And they were just kind of, swapping information. And some of the people that were in the group at the table representing Broadleaf knew that I'd been working on a collection of short stories. Mm-hmm. And I guess my name had gotten mentioned, or they said, well, one of our board members isn't here today, but, he's been writing a short story collection and he's almost done with it, or I think he's done with it. And, the representative said, please tell him to send it to me. I would love to publish a short story collection. Mm-hmm. And, which might be a more interesting comment or discussion about how publishing and published work actually happens. Because I feel like the things that you plan for and the things that you set out and say as a writer, okay, I'm going to submit this to these places, this story to these journals, or this manuscript to these publishers, or this book to these agents. And sometimes you get feedback, and sometimes you get nothing, and sometimes it goes nowhere. But a lot of the things that have happened to me as a creative writer have happened just on sort of these random moments. Like I wasn't even there to talk about my short story collection, but yet somebody spoke on my behalf, and it just so happened to be the person that was there that day wanted to see it. And I sent them the collection, and they loved it and signed me up and bought the manuscript. And I was thrilled and honored, and they've been great to work with. But just love those moments where, and it's one of those random things talking about email. I just got this email from Colorful Crow like on Monday. I knew the event had been Saturday, and I got an email and said, I was at the such and such festival, and I was at the Broadleaf table, and they told me about you and told me that you had a collection. And I never expected Monday morning that to be in my inbox. I wasn't even really ready to send that collection out yet, even though it was finished. And so there's kind of interesting, cool coincidences that happen sometimes with writing and publishing. It is really how I ended up with Colorful Crow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew both of the owners. Now Vicky's doing it, but I knew both of them from some just connections with writers groups in the area. So I live at the next county over from where they are. So they've done 2 of my books, and I've been real happy with them. So you write thrillers. You have 2 series of thrillers, right? One is about a female detective.
That's right.
And the other one is about, and they're both a male, and they're both in West Virginia.
The Ronan McCullough series, he's in Charleston, West Virginia, where I'm from. And then the female series with Stacey Tabbitt is set in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Okay. I went to Ohio University, and also my roots in Appalachia are very deep. I was just up there last week for my mother grew up my roots go back to Dickinson County, Virginia, which is right on the West Virginia border. To the 1840s. So I was up at their historical society doing a writer event, and it was I like to go there. I spent a lot of time there when I was a kid. But why thrillers? And what is the difference between a thriller and a mystery?
Oh, that's a great question too. I think the difference between a thriller and a mystery is really the focus. In that a mystery, you're really trying to solve the whodunit puzzle. There's typically a murder. Someone has died under unexpected circumstances, and someone is responsible for kind of untangling the backstory and figuring out how and why did this person end up where they are in the condition that they are, and sort of unspool those threads and unspool the life and the details and the background and the history of this individual, which oftentimes connects them to friends and family and jobs.
Yes.
Those kinds of things. I think for the thriller, the focus is a little different. The thriller, the focus is about danger. It's about suspense. It's about pacing. It's about, giving the reader sort of a story that just explodes kind of from the first page. And the protagonist of that story in a thriller, more so than a mystery, their life is usually in peril. Like they're either they have a significant chance or opportunity to have themselves physically wounded, emotionally wounded, or have people in their lives physically and emotionally wounded as they pursue this cause. So I guess the easiest way I would describe it, for an example, like if you've read the Jack Reacher series with Lee Child, that would be a thriller, because Jack Reacher physically and emotionally put in grave danger every book he's in, every plot that he and the pace just kicks off from page one and doesn't really let up until the end. And then the mystery might be like Agatha Christie, like Murder on the Orient Express or The Death on the Nile or something like that, where there is a body that has shown up in a place that it shouldn't be, under circumstances that shouldn't have taken place. And it's Poirot's responsibility to kind of unspool and find out, how did Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so get here? So I think those are the big differences. But they're both great genres. And in terms of thrillers for me, I love that. I love the pacing of a thriller. I love being dropped in the middle of a chaotic scene on the first page, and I have to kind of find my way out. Like, what's going on here? Who are these people? How are they connected? What's really going on here? Who's got the motive? Who's got the angle? How are they trying to work that angle or motive against someone else? And I love that. I just love that sort of breakneck pace and speed. And I love the fact that you can have a lot more red herrings, I think, in a thriller than a traditional mystery. And you typically have not to be grotesque, but you typically have a higher body count in thrillers than you do in mysteries. There typically is one victim in a mystery, but in a thriller, you could have several.
Yeah.
And, I love that part as a reader and a writer too, when I think, okay, the reader's going to think this person did it, or I think this person did it. And then you turn to page 69 and that person got, stabbed, or that person got pushed off the edge or something, like, oh, well, it's not that person. And then we go on to the next thing. So, and I got interested in reading those a lot, Barbara. I loved when I was a kid, I loved the Encyclopedia Brown mysteries. I loved the Hardy Boys. I loved those scholastic choose your own adventure stories where, if you wanted Joey to go down the dark path, you turn to page 35. If you wanted Joey to go the other way, you turn to page 55, and ended up having two different stories in one book. I just loved all of that as a reader, as a kid. So I've been interested in that genre really for a long, long time, going back to my elementary school years.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I don't like the term cozy mystery, because to me, if somebody died, that shouldn't be cozy. But yeah. So. Okay, now getting towards I have two more questions. The next one is, what's the difference between Southern and Appalachian? Or is there, or am I,
I would say Appalachian. And this is kind of speaking in broad generalities. There's always exceptions to this. But I think Appalachian literature, Appalachian fiction, Appalachian noir is connected very strongly to place, the physical place, but also the cultural mores and the norms that establish that place. not that doesn't happen in Southern noir and Southern fiction, but so much of really strong Appalachian fiction and Appalachian noir is tied into the town, the community, the state, the place that the story takes place, because it's not just the physical topography. It's the generations of family who have lived there. It's the generations of family that control things. It's the generations of family that have the wealth that kind of dictate what goes on in the community. And I think that really makes that stand out more so than Southern literature, where place is important. But I think, when I think about, reading in both of those genres, Southern fiction to me is more about the relationships that characters have, good and bad. Oftentimes those are fraught with complexities and betrayal and lies. And you have that in Appalachian fiction as well. But Appalachian fiction, all of that is tied so strongly to place, to the sense of place. And I think that makes the strong difference. I don't think you could take a really good Appalachian fiction story and put it, in Los Angeles and it have the same effect, or put it in a place where all of these backgrounds and all these connections and history and generational family developments and all of this is not there. I just don't think you would have stories. I think that, to me, that's the biggest difference.
Yeah. Having just been up there, I'm always very conscious of the fact that in the parts of Appalachia I'm used to, I don't like this word, but there's isolation.
Right.
There's remote. I mean, the county my mom grew up in is very remote, and it's the poorest one, and it's the youngest county in Virginia, and it's just, there's no state highway through it. It's all and no, I mean, U.S. highway. It's all state highways, or the lowest level, and it's just so interesting to be there, because the sense of places. This is a different place. It's hard to get to. It's just, and the people are unique in a certain way, and they all. We were joking about this, but there's certain names in the county that everybody's related to somewhere. Mullins is one of them. Everybody's got a Mullins in their family, and or a couple other names that are in my family as well. So it's just real interesting. Okay, my last question is, because I could talk to you for a long time, but we are getting towards lunchtime here, and it's getting hot out here too, and I'm taking a lot of your time, but. There's a podcast I listen to called The Habit, and it's the man who runs it is a Flannery O'Connor scholar, but he always asks. Let me get this right. He always asks at the end, because he mostly talks to writers. He asks the questions: who are the writers that make you want to write? Now, for me, that'd be a hard question. I do have an answer if I'm ever on his podcast, but whatever. But who, if not that one, who are the writers that you return to, are your favorites, or affect your own approach to writing?
John Steinbeck and Pat Conroy.
Oh, okay.
Who are the two whose work I go back to constantly. John Steinbeck's my favorite classical writer. I know that he won the Pulitzer Prize for The Grapes of Wrath, which is a wonderful book, but his book, East of Eden, is probably his best book, and it's just a masterpiece of 20th century storytelling and literature. And it's basically Steinbeck's take on the Cain and Abel story from the Bible. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't read it, I would encourage you, if you like stories and you like reading, or you're looking for inspiration for writing, to read that one. I think a lot of K-12 still read of Mice and Men and The Pearl and some of those other stories, but East of Eden is his most masterful work. And what I loved about Steinbeck, and what I always go back to, is he had a way of writing characters, bad characters, that were so awful, but yet you sympathized with why they were the way they were, and they acted the way they did, and why they said the things that they did. It didn't mean you condoned it or accepted it, but you understood sort of why they did that. And so when I'm thinking about creating antagonists or creating characters with a little bit of roughness around the edges, I always go back and kind of look at how Steinbeck did it. He did it very subtly. It wasn't with, panache, and it wasn't with an explosion, and it oftentimes was just through dialogue. It was through the way they presented themselves, the way they dressed, the way they responded to certain questions. He just did it in such a subtle way. It was just masterful. And then Pat Conroy, who is just, I mean, The Prince of Tides is one of the greatest books I've ever read. And if you haven't read that one, I would encourage you to read that. But the way he could construct sentences and the way he could paint a scene or paint a setting or paint a character with words is just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, I have moments, and I've read The Prince of Tides probably 15 times, and I come across similar passages that I've read, all those times, and I'm still just in awe of how beautifully he wrote and described a certain thing in that chapter. And so, when I'm looking at language and I'm looking at how to construct phrasing and how to use phraseology to convey meaning in writing, I oftentimes will go back to Conroy and read his. So those two writers, I go back to their work all the time. And I'm so sad that, we lost Pat Conroy a few years ago, pancreatic cancer. Because I used to look forward to every October is when his new book came out. And I used to look forward to every October, a new Pat Conroy book would be out. Mm-hmm. But those would be two writers that I always go back to and always am looking back on and looking at how they did certain things with their work.
All right. Well, I so appreciate your time. That was a good long discussion of almost an hour. And so thank you for joining us today, Dr. Parker.
Thank you, Barbara. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled to have been able to talk today with Dr. Eliot Parker. Listeners, please look up his work, and his website is in the show notes. Thank you, Eliot, for being with us today. Folks, here's where I put in the commercials. First, please share the links of this podcast in your social media feeds. Second, if you have someone you think would be a great guest, send their name my way. Third, check out my website and books too. I have recently republished 3 of my self-published books: The Unexpected Christmas Visitors, Long Lost Promise, and Long Lost Justice. The goal was to update them, be sure they're entirely error-free, and change the looks. The 2 Long Lost books are also available on Audible and Kindle and print. Finally, if you want to support this podcast, see the GoFundMe link in the show notes. I will be at the Rabbit Valley Farmers Market on July 19th and August 2nd, at the Book and Barrel Bookstore in Ringgold on August 9th in the evening, and the Ackworth Book and Storytelling Festival on August 23rd. Come out and see me and support the arts. Goodbye.